And the next person maybe can be Clinton to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Clinton Nabis, and I'm an Indigenous man. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And, magic mushrooms pretty much saved my life. I didn't really know anything about them when I started using them. I actually started using them to get high. I was completely unaware that they were a medicine. And, I had a complete transformation. They helped me overcome all kinds of addictions, destructive behavior. They helped me deal with trauma. A lot of, they pretty much pulled me out of ignorance. So, after experimenting with them a bit, I was able to overcome all those things and, actually start reading, actually start being healthy. And so, they had a complete, they gave me a complete transformation. So yeah, they changed, not only changed my life, but pretty much saved my life, you could say.
That's awesome to hear that. And I feel like I'm somewhat in the same boat as you. I feel like I have been able to use psychedelics as definitely a tool for self-improvement, but maybe not quite to the same level that you have. Okay, so a little bio for me. I'll try and make this as short as possible. My name is Jeff LeBeau. I'm an experienced mushroom cultivator and a lifelong mycophile living in beautiful British Columbia. I've been deeply involved in the psychedelic mushroom space for several years now, and my passion for exploring both the scientific and the more metaphysical aspects of these mushrooms is a direct result of my own psilocybin experiences. I'm the founder of a few websites in the psychedelics space. One is called Psilopedia, and that is an online resource that offers information on mushroom taxonomy, pharmacology, cultivation, research, directories of doctors and therapists, marketplace, and businesses offering psilocybe-related products. And I'm also the founder of Spores Lab, which is the leading Canadian provider of psilocybe and non-psilocybe, let's say, mushroom genetics and growing mediums and growing supplies and all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeff. So I guess we'll just go around and who would like to start sharing first? Clinton, Michael, Jeff?
Anna?
No, I'll go last.
I can start because I have a 1-year-old who may wake up at any moment. So the fact that we're in a quiet mode right now, it is a sweet spot kind of time to for me to speak, if everyone's okay with that.
For sure.
All right, let me just, I'm just going to time myself. I think I'll give myself 15 minutes. I'll try and blast through a lot of information because I'm sure like everybody here talk for, hours about this topic. But for the most part, what I wanted to sort of share in terms of my experience today was the way that microdosing can be used as a performance enhancing compound based on the experience that I've cultivated over the last few years, which it's a drop in the bucket compared to what a lot of people have done. And there's a lot of names that I'd like to throw out, but I'm not too sure if, they want to. So I'll leave it there, but maybe next time I will speak with them first. It's an interesting community because we have people who actually compete in the Olympics, people in the X Games who, are venturing forward with this kind of supplement that is so powerful. I find that we can, have so many self-realizations about. It's just a shame that, and for the longest time until now, thankfully, it was always sort of kept quiet, more discreet than anything. So it's such a beautiful thing that Anna, Jeff, everybody here together is able to put their experiences into a communal setting and share all the information that I think I only know very little about this topic itself, but combined with everybody else, I feel it's such a symbiotic community. But to sort of get to my experience, the one thing I've realized more than anything is that microdosing can be such an important tool for self-development more than anything. I went into it a few years ago thinking, you know, I would microdose and it would help me think faster. It would, you know, improve my reflexology, sort of the things you'll see in movies, various movies like Limitless, I think was one. But I came out of it realizing, you know, we have everything already in our minds. It just psilocybin, it opens a new level of focus that you can use, that, you know, similar in a way to cannabis, similar in a way to coffee, just, you know, combined with any sort of if you compound it with the right purpose, the right setting, it can be monumentally life-changing in terms of what you're, you know, trying to achieve. And my experience, despite having a lot of recreational macrodosing experiences, because I can't really put pen to paper when I'm macrodosing, but microdosing offered a very good good form to see if I could improve myself on various physical metrics. And what I found, I will go through a few, you know, specifics, but more than anything, if anyone is willing to, you know, or wanting to try this sort of application, the two areas that I found the most success in, and I've written about this at length. Unfortunately, it's very long, so you'd have to have a lot of patience to read through that, but cardiovascular performance and isometric strength. So the first being very simply things like jogging, swimming, running, cycling. And I'll get to why I think that, why it is that microdosing sort of opens up a new plateau of performative capability. But the second application that I found a lot of success with was isometric strength hold. So that's things like planking, you know, things that really focus on endurance more than anything. To start with, what I want to start with first, what really changed the game for me was grounding my microdosing experience with an intent of some kind and focusing on the engagement of the activity. This happened naturally over time. Like I said, I went into it thinking my reflexes would be improved. I didn't really think my strength would be improved, but, you know, there's wishful thinking on that part. And I came out of it realizing that it's just a different level of focus that you engage with, which made it tricky because I found that as soon as I was putting pen to paper, recording my statistics, recording my speeds, my times, my ventures, unless I had, you know, a fitness tracker kind of detailing how fast I could swim across a lake and back, or, you know, how far I can, you know, jog without stopping, it was really difficult to get into, to switch from that mindset of being completely immersed within an activity and, you know, going to a more administrative position where I have to jot down notes and take notes. And that's why it was so tricky. I had paper, I had notes on my phone, I had notes on my laptop. Every time I go into a self-study, I promise to be organized, and it doesn't end up happening. So eventually down the line, I'd like to maybe have a few test subjects that I can administer from a distance rather than having to do it myself, but that would be less fun for me. So the one other point I wanted to mention before I sort of get into my next point is, I think Anna actually articulated it perfectly when she used the term sweet spot. And that's one thing I'm finding that is beautiful about this community is you develop your own certain terms like sweet spots. Can't recall any others now, but you end up seeing that these terms align with everybody else's terms, and it just all these paths lead to the same destination. But it's a little bit tricky when it comes to physical performance and determining what that sweet spot would be. I noticed that tolerance builds up extremely fast. And as a lot of people here know, there is a cycle you'd have to commit to with a few days on, a few days off. For myself, it ended up being between 180 to about 200 milligrams that I would find, or that I would consider the sweet spot. As soon as I went over 200 milligrams, I am 155 to 160 pounds. So on the lighter side. But as soon as I went over 200 milligrams, at that point, and I'll talk about what kind of strains I used as well, but at that point I found that a fatigue would set in, a disinterest as well. And it was very prominent, very noticeable. So I would always, for the first typically 4 days, build up from 170 to 200 milligrams and then take my 3 days off. At that point, I would reset and again, start from 170 to 200. At first, it was always the golden teacher strain. I got confident last summer where I began experimenting with different types of strains, that being Mexican cubensis, Amazonian, which Amazonian opened a lot of other questions for me, again, worms in terms of, I think the potency is what threw me off the rails a little bit, but that's something for next summer to figure out, possibly in the winter. For the most part, in terms of a comparative analysis that I'll touch on very quickly, because I'm trying to hit on all the points that I think people might want to know in terms of data. Mexican cubensis would be my top priority, next to APE, and then golden teacher afterwards, just for consistency. Again, like Jeff alluded to earlier, there's a lot of variability in terms of, what's cultivated, how it's stored. I found that storing it in my hot shed through the summer was not really the best idea, but for the most part, it was easy to, after a certain time, build a consistent structure around what you were doing. It was just hard to devote yourself to a certain application and make it less enjoyable, because I found the psilocybin was really promoting the sense of immersion within that activity. I don't know if I should stop for questions or if I should just keep rambling on. I feel like I'm kind of torturing everybody here, but how are we doing? Am I good to go for another 5 minutes or so? Or
Yeah. So we'll have questions after every panelist shares their
perfect.
story. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what I found ultimately, taking these small doses of psilocybin will effectuate an expanded level of focus, akin to a macro dose, but of course on a much smaller scale. So this expanded or elevated focus can be used to improve upon whatever it is we want to achieve, because we're able to generate that more immersive experience. I found, for instance, with swimming, you're not thinking about the discomforts you're getting after a certain amount of time. Same with cycling and running. The discomforts, the immediate thoughts you'd have as to, how fast am I going? Why am I feeling this way? They're set aside, and you're more so tuned into the holistic system at play of your body. That being said, this is if you want to be. I found that intention played a critical role. For myself, this is where the placebo effect came into play. And this is something I was very nervous about at the start. My relationship with the placebo effect is something that I would call or consider moving from sort of enemy territory to becoming a friend. As I say in one of my studies, psilocybin creates an irresistible placebo effect in the mind, which ultimately leads to improved physical capability. We can exploit that placebo effect. In fact, I think we need that placebo effect to springboard off of. I find that the placebo effect can be reconceptualized in a way to be regarded as our intention and motivation if we decipher the cause of it in the first place. So we can work alongside of that rather than, antagonistically wondering, if it's, affecting us in a certain way. I think if I were to, develop any sort of action plan for anybody, it would be to just sort of not worry about the placebo effect and not even label it that, just reconceptualize everything as our intention. So more than anything, I found that through the results I've published, the readership that I've had come forward and email in with similar experiences is what kept me going. My website, it was just sort of more of a blog where I interviewed, random professors and interesting characters. But when I had readers come to me and, write in saying, hey, I read how microdosing helped you, in a certain athletic context, as it did for me. And I find the consistency of all these accounts to be such a beautiful thing. I have somebody in India who's, using it for soccer. I had a martial artist in Poland. I had somebody in, I forget the other countries. I know there was Mexico, there was Australia. I forget the different applications, but everybody is immensely interested in how, microdosing can take you to that elevated state of self-awareness that you put throughout whatever it is, whatever sportive activity you're engaged with. What's been so interesting to me is just realizing how wrong I was in the first place and thinking that, it's something that affects you neurochemically, but the mind ends up being this indirect, the compound ends up being this indirect substance that flows through the mind. Everything is happening within our mind and how we choose to think about whatever activities we're engaged in. So I found, if I'm doing weighted pull-ups, I'm not focusing so much on the fatigue in my arms, the burn in, my shoulders and all that. It's not a physiological concern anymore. It's more of a mental overarching, why am I doing this, and why does it feel so good throughout my whole, body and mind to be doing this? I'm dramatizing a little bit. It's more of a macro dosing situation to start thinking of it that, deeply, but it's in a way not too different from a macro dose. It just, smaller and more consistent. And the very last point I'll touch on, with respect to neuroplasticity, and this is something that I'm coming across very often, and this is something I've written about quite at length. We can change the way we think, whether it's in a sportive context, whether it's, in a creative context, financial context for stock traders, what have you. Our thinking habits change, according to the effort we put into it and the self-awareness we employ, and microdosing is just a beautiful tool to get us there. So that's my story. I'm glad I didn't see the participant, number drop drastically since I started talking. So I'll leave it there. And I'm very excited to hopefully join again. And I thank everybody who coordinated this and who attended this to, take the time out of their day to contribute to the symbiotic community. There's, this concept of symbiosis, and I find it's just thriving when it comes to this topic. So I'm glad we're all here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. No, it's very valuable, especially because, performance enhancement is something that I'm using microdosing for, and I've been trying to pile it up with other biohacking techniques to, as well increase neuroplasticity, change my behavior, change my mental state, my emotional state. So thank you so much for your story. I'm sure everyone found it valuable. Who would like to go next? Clinton, Jeff? Maybe Clinton.
Hi. So
Hello.
yeah, I don't know exactly how to do this, because my experience was like really it was an explosion. So I was in a state of absolute ignorance, not absolute ignorance, but I was in a lower state of consciousness when I started using magic mushrooms, and the transformation that they induced was just, it was out of this world. It was nothing short of miraculous. So they really got me. They got me reading, and I started reading, all kinds of, I started with Carl Jung, so I started to discover things about myself that I was unaware of. So, it wasn't just the magic mushrooms, but it was also the knowledge that had a really intense experience on me. So anyone who knows the works of Carl Jung knows that, just his books alone are very powerful. They are a very effective way to raise the consciousness of anyone, because, when you look at humanity, we all have the same structure of our psyches. So when you read the works of Carl Jung, you're reading about yourself, and that naturally leads to personal development, growth, and I also got into other subjects, philosophy, shamanism. I found out that shamans have been using psychedelic plant medicines for thousands of years. So, I had like an explosion of consciousness, and it started out with the higher doses, and they were very powerful. But I didn't start microdosing until a bit later on, a few years into it. And I do find that the microdosing is extremely powerful for people who are pursuing self-development or trying to better themselves, trying to improve. Like, they really seem to put you in a state of growth rather than stagnation. Because I do notice, from my past that a lot of my life I wasn't really going anywhere. But once I started using magic mushrooms, everything pretty much changed. And I'm now at the point, like, I'm always learning. So even right now, I'm just realizing I should probably take a few days off, because I do tend to microdose every single day, and I do usually take multiple capsules a day. And just reading the comments here, maybe it's a good idea for me to take a few days off. So I'm always learning, and that's the thing with knowledge, is it never ends. So the magic mushrooms also help me to overcome and deal with things like trauma and nihilism, negativity. I started getting into philosophy as well, and what they really did for me is they freed my mind. They helped me to take back my mind and achieve individual sovereignty. And that's one of the most powerful and important things that we need these days, because if you look at the world, I mean, everyone is seeming to fall into the system. Everyone is, this system is an enemy of freedom. And when I say the system, I mean pretty much everything. Television, government, the media. It's all like a big machine that just takes control of your mind, and it binds and enslaves us. And it's almost impossible to go through your life without absorbing some level of indoctrination. I mean, if you look at the way society is behaving right now, I mean, we are being manipulated and controlled by tyrants. And this has to do a lot with the fact that people's minds are controlled by the system. So, one of the best solutions to escape from this systematic tyranny is to free your mind, and to realize that, the system only really exists in your mind, because it doesn't really have power. The only reason it appears to have power is because the people who have given their minds over to the system have put their belief in the system, and that therefore is giving their power away. So they are able to be controlled and manipulated. And I think that magic mushrooms have the potential to not only free people's minds, but to raise their consciousness as well. And that's one of the things I think we really need in the world today, especially with all of the tyranny that's going on. So I hate to get into the tyranny aspect of things, but it is something that's happening worldwide. And I do think we are going to overcome it. And yeah, like, when it comes to magic mushrooms, I don't see any reason why anyone shouldn't be microdosing. I think they have the potential to help anyone and everyone. And even if you're perfectly healthy and you're successful, if you start microdosing, you can still improve your life in a lot of ways that you might not even have thought possible. So, it's a very, very powerful medicine. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Clinton. I can totally relate to what you said.
Likewise.
Yeah, in the realm
Absolutely.
during microdoses, you see all the possibilities of all you can be, and then it's up to you to really choose how you want to live and how you want to act and what you want to feel in a way. It's very empowering. Yeah. Thank you so much, Clinton.
Thank you.
I think it's quite a common thread, in the psychedelic space that that once you start taking psychedelics, whether at a microdose or a macrodose, it usually is a catalyst for some kind of personal development, whether that's physical health, whether that's improving your diet, or starting to get into philosophy and explore philosophy. Yeah, I think they across the board are an effective tool for personal development.
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. I just want to mention as well that I am on ThinkSpot, and I do want to promote that website. It is it's censorship free. So if you're a writer, if you write articles or anything, like, it's an excellent website for putting things out that will not get censored. It was started by Dr. Jordan Peterson, and like, for myself, I've been trying to share my story uh, through all the wrong avenues. It seems YouTube has been censoring a lot of things. Facebook, I mean, the censorship is everywhere. So yeah, ThinkSpot is definitely a very good alternative, especially for people who are writing or producing, creating things. So I just got on there, and I think with all the censorship that's happening now, that website might actually be expanding quite a bit. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Do you mind typing in the chat the link?
It could, yeah.
As well,
Yeah.
if you type in https:// before it, then it will hyperlink it, and someone can click on it right from the chat and be taken to the website. But I'm going to check that website out tonight. I actually have heard one other person mention ThinkSpot, but yeah, it's perfect timing with all of the censorship that's going on right now. And that goes back to your point about tyranny, right? Like there is obvious and overt and blatant censorship going on all of the social media networks, and even on radio stations in Canada. And as a great example of that, I listen to CBC radio, usually on my way to work in the car. And almost every day I hear them listing off the political candidates in our area. And I know for a fact that there is a PPC, a People's Party of Canada candidate in our area, but he never gets mentioned on the radio, right? They say the Conservative candidate is this guy, the Liberal candidate is this guy, the Green candidate is this guy, the NDP candidate is this guy. No mention of the PPC. But it has been really awesome to see people, at least in BC, to stand up against the announcement that was made last Monday, I believe it was. I'm not going to lie about it at all. I think that everyone should have autonomy to make their own medical decisions, period, the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's for another topic. I know we can get into that and go into that rabbit hole, but I want to put you back into the psychedelic stories. So you're next.
Okay. Well, I'm actually going to buck the trend a little bit here, and I'm going to tell one. So I'm going to share two psychedelic experiences, and one of them is actually going to be a negative experience. Now I'll start off with the negative one, I guess. And this negative experience doesn't directly involve me in the sense that it wasn't me having the negative experience, but I was with the person who did end up having a negative experience. And it was actually the first time that we both had ever taken psychedelic mushrooms. This would have been probably probably more than that, probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And my friend was visiting from Australia, and he was actually here on a work visa. And we decided to take some magic mushrooms, later in the evening, Friday night kind of thing, like in a recreational sense, not in a therapeutic sense. And we were new to it. So we didn't use a scale, we didn't try to weigh our dosage. We didn't pay too much attention to our set and setting. And it backfired a little bit. So we started out I believe we took about 3.5 grams each, which is quite a large dose for a first-time user. And the night started out really awesome. We were having a really good time. So there was actually 3 people there, and we were on the 3rd friend's farm. He had a property about 10 acres. So we were kind of exploring this property. It was an awesome experience for the first probably 3 or 4 hours. And then after, probably about 3.5 hours in, our Australian friend started to get a little bit worried. And we could tell, that there was something kind of up with him a little bit, that he wasn't in the same mindset that we were. And he kind of, got into a downhill spiral and just started having a worse and worse experience up until the point that he was, actually like verbally shouting gibberish, was pretty, quote unquote, far gone. So we actually ended up calling the ambulance for him, and they had the ambulance come out, and the paramedics were awesome. They have experienced this before, but they ended up strapping him down to the gurney in the back of the ambulance, which was probably not the best thing for him. But I later found out that he had some subconscious kind of fear about being deported back to Australia. Now, he had heard of other people on work visas getting caught doing illicit substances and being deported. So he had that some subconscious fear throughout the entire experience. And a couple hours into the experience, that really started to manifest. And that really goes back to just the proper preparation of set and setting, which is pretty crucial for having a good experience. And in the end, it was all fine. He didn't get deported. And the next day he was perfectly fine, and we all talked about it. We all laughed about it. But yeah, it's a great example of really how important set and setting and just being comfortable with with the experience that you're going into, and what it might hold. So we'll get the negative experience out of the way first, and then move on to a little bit more positive experience. There's still, I guess, an element of negativity, but I was involved with a girl. This was probably 3 or 4 summers ago, and the simplest way I can put it, I think, was that I liked her more than she liked me. And after we had hung out for a couple months, we kind of had a falling out, and I took psychedelics, this time not in a recreational sense, more in a therapeutic sense, to try and do some introspection and examine myself and kind of see if there were any areas that I could improve on, and it certainly worked. So I think just the fact that I had some intention going into that experience of what I wanted to get out of the experience made it really, really positive in the long run. Because when I look back on that, I do think that was really the turning point where I started to become really interested in psychedelics. That was right before I started growing mushrooms. So I do think that has had a pretty big impact on my life for the positive. Yeah. So that, I guess both of my stories kind of tie into how set and setting and intention really do play a huge role in a psychedelic experience. And that is also confirmed by nearly all of the studies that are coming out showing such high effectiveness rates for psychedelics in the treatment of depression and trauma and anxiety, addiction, Alzheimer's. I can go on. So yeah, all of these studies, they're done in conjunction with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So it's not just, you take a psychedelic and you go off into another dimension and you come back completely healed and a different person. It's a psychedelic in conjunction with actually talking through any issues that you're facing with a psychedelic integration practitioner. And that is really what I think is causing these studies to have such high effectiveness rates. And it's pretty insane. Like an example I can cite for depression in specific, study out of Johns Hopkins University found that using psilocybin to treat depression had a somewhere between 70 and 80% effectiveness rate when a large dose of psilocybin was combined with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Whereas traditional depression medications, SSRI medications, typically have an effectiveness rate between 20 and 40%. So it's, you know, more than doubling up to like almost quadrupling in some cases, the effectiveness rates of current medications when combined with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And, you know, there's a lot to be said really for the medical utility of psilocybin. But I think there also is something to be said for just its ability to improve the life of the healthy individual, because I wouldn't have said that I was depressed, or I wouldn't have said that I was you know, really in a bad place at all. But I still did a psychedelic experience with some intention and found that that was the catalyst for not only self-improvement, but, you know, just kind of changing my life for the better in all regards.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. You did touch on all the most important parts of a psychedelic trip, which is setting, intention, and the integration part, because they are not magic. Oh, sorry. They're not magic pills that will, you know, save you from yourself or fix your life by any means. Because I think a lot of people think about psychedelics like that, and that's such a wrong way of going about them. Thank you, Jeff. No
worries. Yeah. And then I actually wanted to quickly touch on one thing that Michael was saying about putting pen to paper. I actually quite like putting pen to paper when I'm doing a macro dose. And usually I have a really good laugh when I come back and look at it and look at what I've wrote the next day when I'm sober. And it also is good to kind of refresh and like bring back some of those, you know, some of those abstract trains of thought that you have when you're on psychedelics or when you're on a high dose. So I will. And taking notes. And maybe not even just taking notes, but just having a pen and paper handy. And, you know, if you feel like writing something down while you're in the midst of the psychedelic experience, like by all means.
Would totally agree, Jeff. It's I remember the first time I ever did it, or sorry, maybe the second time, I just had pages and pages of notes. And then every time since then doing a macro dose, I would make sure to have a pen and paper ready. But unfortunately, I never sort of rekindled that first you know, book I almost wrote. But for me, recording statistics is what kind of kills the vibe a little bit. So it's that's the tricky part. But abstract ideas, you know, revelations and all that, I think, yeah, I would be in line to definitely agree with you. Everybody should certainly have a pen, paper, recorder, some sort of device to, you know, make sure you're capturing the experience.
For sure. Yeah, and then I mean, that can be used as a tool for integration in the future as well.
Yeah, I normally record myself because I tried writing down and it doesn't work. Yeah. So should I go with my story as well?
For sure.
Okay, I'll keep it brief. But so psychedelics, I've started doing psychedelics. So I'm originally from Romania. I've never heard of psychedelics before coming to Canada. And I was quite judgmental against drugs, all drugs, but I was also very curious. So it was like, you know, it was a conundrum for me. However, I started doing psychedelics 4.5 years ago, and I have 3 types of experiences. I've experienced with psychedelics on their own, stacking psychedelics, and microdosing. And I feel like the stacking psychedelics where you combine, you know, LSD with ketamine or ketamine with DMT or cannabis and ketamine or whatever you do, that's where a lot of the magic happens. But I'll stick with probably one of my LSD trips, because that was the beginning of my journey into microdosing. So it was my first time microdosing with LSD. We both took a tab and we just walked through the forest. And when at the time when we were peaking, we ended up being at the end of at the edge of the forest, outside in the sun. And I was lying down in the sun with my eyes closed, and I could feel myself floating at the edge of the earth. Beneath me, there was, the human existence and everything that exists on this realm. And above me was a bright light that I consider it to be a divine light, divine creative light. And I felt my body quite tense, but as I started relaxing into the feeling, I felt my chest opening, and that creative light poured through me, and I became a portal for it to manifest into this world. And in that moment, I think I realized that I had so many fears holding me back to actually go into pursue some of the passion projects. And it was a decisive moment for me to say, okay, well, I'm interested in microdosing. I should just go for it. And so, starting the microdosing journey and the journal, I worked through a lot of blockages I had around money and investing money in things that I'm passionate about without knowing whether they would pan out or not. And then obviously from there was like an amazing growth, and work through shadow and all other stuff. But it was fantastic to just see how we are here, tools for the divine to manifest. And in that moment, I felt that if I did everything in life but that, my life would have been in vain. And so that's how I try and live my life right now, by, allowing things to pour through me, and not necessarily comply and try and fit into other people's idea of what I should be doing. I have never really done that, but I think that LSD trip really confirmed it for me. And so that's how the microdosing journey started. And I'm here with you sharing the story. So it's been a fantastic journey, and I love every single bit of it. Thank you.
And I have a question I want to ask. First, I want to ask to all the panelists, and then I would love to have everyone answer the question as well. But what's your favorite psychedelic?
My favorite psychedelic is ketamine. And it's not quite a psychedelic per se, but I feel like ketamine always shows me the truth about my life and my reality. And I like combining it with other psychedelics, because that's where I end up in the field of all possibilities. That's where I see all reality all at once, and I get to assign meaning to this one. And it's just fascinating to be in that realm.
Nice. I have never tried it.
Well,
yeah, I guess the time is coming up pretty soon, probably. What about you, Michael? Do you have a favorite psychedelic?
Technically, no, because I haven't explored too many. I feel like LSD on the horizon is going to become my new favorite, but right now I'd have to say psilocybin. I mean, it's something I grew up with. It's something that I've listened to hours and hours of Terence McKenna talk about it. Paul Stamets. I forget the other names, but it's just such a flowing through history, flowing through every discipline, every type of activity. It's just something that unifies so many people. So favorite so far, I think, in terms of theory, but in practice, ask me again in a few years and I'm sure I'll have possibly a different answer. There's something I know too. There's not know for a fact, not to ramble again, but I know that a lot of scientists right now, from what who I've spoken with, they're trying to isolate the certain, I guess, molecular structure of psilocybin to create new applications for it. So I think there's going to be a lot of new mediums or new substances in the future that will be a little bit more maybe efficient. I don't know if I'm a fan of that idea, but it will probably alter the landscape and, you know, create a lot of more general acceptance towards psychedelics. So long answer to your short question.
Yeah, well, I actually do know that one company in specific, which one is it?
It's not Neon Mind, is it?
No, it's, God, they were the first one to IPO on the Neo Stock Exchange like last January 2020.
Numinous?
No, not Numinous. MindMed. MindMed is developing a molecule that they call FT104, and it's supposedly, you know, it's looking like in their trials that it's quite a similar experience to psilocybin, but it's about 1/4 of the length. So they're trying to develop this in order to still give people a therapeutic experience, but to have more throughput through their clinics. I agree with you, Michael. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I totally feel like there is an entourage effect that comes from an actual mushroom, just like cannabis. And there's actually been up to, I believe, 35 or 36 different alkaloids found in mushrooms, you know, so far, so potentially more. But I do believe that an actual mushroom does have an entourage effect that a synthesized molecule or even synthetic psilocybin doesn't have.
Yeah.
And to your point too, oh, sorry, but to keep kind of sidetracking, to your point too, I think, I don't know if it's Jay who is the CEO of MindMed, but I know they're working on something else that they're not really putting out there right now. It's interesting as to what's happening. I tried to interview them a few times, but just completely got shut down when I started asking questions as to, you know, what they're putting out, as they should be sort of, you know, keeping that, you know, from the public at first until they have trials and all that. But they are, you know, it's very indicative that, you know, they're definitely exploring new options, but for sure.
And now I do know there's a couple other companies, the one Anna mentioned in specific, Numinous, who are working on a formulation they're extracted from actual mushrooms. So the you know, the problem that all these pubcos are trying to solve is creating a consistent product, right? Because like I was mentioning to Clinton earlier, there's always going to be some variability when you actually cultivate mushrooms, because each individual mushroom culture is an individual, similar to humans in that regard. So the biggest issue standing in the way of a psilocybin treatment that could be spread to the masses is that consistency, right? Like a doctor needs to be able to say, I'm going to give you this pill and it has 25 milligrams of psilocybin in it, and I know what's going to happen when more or less when you take that pill.
Yes, the need to control every single aspect. Anyways, I want to get to Clinton and yourself and tell us which are your favorite psychedelics, and then we'll open up for questions from the public.
Well, my favorite is absolutely magic mushrooms. I've only ever done magic mushrooms and a little bit of LSD. I tried LSD microdosing. It was good, but by far my favorite are magic mushrooms, and I think they're perfect the way they are. I don't think scientists or companies or corporations should be doing some of the things they're doing. I'm sure there's plenty of good out there, but it seems that every time man tries to interfere with nature, he makes it worse or he ruins it. So I think that's I don't even know what Jeff is talking about, but I'm just I'm very mistrustful when it comes to scientists and companies, corporations getting involved with things like this. If we look at what's happened in the past, it all always ends up being more about the sickness, more about the profit. So, I'm always very, I guess you could say, suspicious, but some of the things that Blue Goba is doing with their strains and their drying processes are, absolutely amazing. The mushrooms are like unbelievable. I can't believe how high quality they are, how, now they even the freeze dried method, I mean, you can barely even taste the mushrooms, whereas before, I don't know if a lot of people out there probably don't like the taste. I really don't like it, especially when I'm doing high doses, because I do higher doses. I get up to 10 grams. So, it's very, very helpful to be able to do that without having to, chew up 10 grams and have that the bad taste that a lot of them have. But like with the microdoses as well, I mean, they're absolutely amazing, and you can try so many different types of their microdoses and have different effects. But yeah, overall, I mean, I would definitely like to try ayahuasca, DMT, all of the plant medicines. But so far, I've only tried magic mushrooms, and I do look forward to a time where we'll be able to freely share and distribute things like DMT and ayahuasca, and I really look forward to doing it in the future. But as of now, my favorite is definitely magic mushrooms.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you, Clinton. How about you, Jeff?
I just first want to touch on freeze drying. So in addition to making mushrooms look better, smell better, and taste better, lyophilization, which is the technical term for freeze drying, also preserves the chemical composition of a fresh mushroom. And typically a fresh mushroom will have higher psilocin levels than a dried mushroom. You lose a certain percentage of psilocin and a certain percentage of psilocybin during the conventional drying process, but you lose more psilocin than you lose psilocybin. So when you take the freeze-dried mushrooms, I find it is a distinctly different experience, and it's a little bit cleaner. I would almost compare it. It's a little bit closer to LSD, I would say. Yeah, just it's an awesome experience, and if you haven't tried it, I would highly recommend getting some freeze dried. But on to my personal favorite psychedelic. I was actually really hoping that one of you would mention mescaline. Mescaline seems to me like a really lesser known psychedelic, and I actually have not tried it, but it's highly regarded by a lot of really influential people in the psychedelic space. A few of those names, for example, would be like Aldous Huxley and Timothy Leary and Paul Austin, the founder of the Third Wave. They've all said that mescaline is their favorite psychedelic. And I've actually never tried it, but I would really like to, and I just ordered some San Pedro powder. So if and when that makes it here, I'm going to try some mescaline, and I will be sure to let you know what I think in a future event. But for right now, I would say that my favorite substance would change whether it's based on a microdose or a macrodose. For microdosing, my favorite would be LSD, and for macrodosing, it would be psilocybin mushrooms.
Nice, thank you. I mean, I've never tried mescaline, so I can't really talk about it. I have some microdoses here, but once I do, I'll let you know if I like it or not.
Awesome. Well, I'm quite excited. There's some really good information. Arrowhead and Third Wave, Paul Austin's website, on what the mescaline experience is like. Yeah, and it's one kind of excerpt that I can cite is it's a combination of all of the best effects from each different psychedelic.
Fantastic. Thank you.
The company that sells this San Pedro powder is going to get 50 orders today.
I think so. Okay, so now we can open it up to the public, and if anyone wants to ask a question or share their experience, you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself, whichever you would like. There you go, we have our first hand. How does this work? Okay, so Adrian, you can ask your question.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Great. Thanks, everyone. This is really, this is wonderful. It's great to hear the stories and to hear everyone sharing their experiences, getting me excited to get back into this. So my experiences with mushrooms are long-standing, mostly to do with like macrodoses, but a sort of lower level, like 2 to 4 grams typically per trip. I've had lots of wonderful adventures on that and incredible learning. I think that I would count that my first experience, my first really profound experience with mushrooms is one of the top, 5 experiences in my life that had an incredible impact on my thinking, on how I move through the world, and it's, yeah, never looking back. But I wanted to ask about microdosing from, those of you on the panel that have experience with it, because I was excited to try it, and the experience wasn't that great. It was sort of what Sam Harris talked about when he sort of said, if you're not doing enough, you get that sort of, you're in the turbulence, in the clouds kind of thing. You never break through. And I always found like I get that kind of like anxious energy and nerves and kind of shakiness and muddled thinking, and very difficult to focus on any tasks, very difficult to be creative. So it actually felt like a performance reducer for me. So I was doing 0.1 of a gram as a sort of normal. I was doing days on, days off, and that was sort of the persistent quality of my experience. So I wonder, should I be doing something different? Does it work differently for different people? Maybe it's just not for me. Just love some insight.
I can jump in here because I started my journey with the same amount, and I felt like I was emotionally exhausted, irritated, as if I smoked a lot of cannabis, lots of, foggy brain and all that. It wasn't pleasant at all. And I lowered my dose. And so I found my sweet spot around 50 milligrams. So maybe you can try that and see how that goes.
Can I please, oh, sorry, go ahead, Anna. I didn't mean to interrupt there.
Yeah, no, that's all I had. If anyone else has anything else, yeah.
I was just very excited to answer this because this is something that comes up a lot in terms of performative capability too. And there's a few individuals I've spoken with, one of which James Oroc, O-R-O-C, for anybody interested. He's actually somebody who's okay with me sharing their names on this topic. He was the one who introduced me to this idea too before I started, of the buildup. For the first 45 minutes, you're getting this sort of anxiety and this, it's easy to get overwhelmed by certain circumstances around you. Other athletes I've spoken with have likened it to sort of like a strenuous hike that gets you to a plateau that once you're there, you can really see the lay of the land. But until you get there, it varies from person to person. For myself, it's something that I've experienced as being usually the first 40 minutes. And in that time, I just try to, accept that first phase is just going to be sort of turbulence is a good term for it too, that I'll probably start incorporating into my work. But I have written about that, and it's frustrating, and I think that's why a lot of people are going to switching over to certain other cleaner, is a term they use, substances like LSD, because from what I hear anyway, you don't really have that experience. But Anna is right. The sweet spot is probably the best way to go. From my experience, I couldn't avoid that. So even to this day, for the first 40 minutes, usually I find that I'm, more easily overwhelmed, or a little bit anxious. But having that self-awareness really helps to circumvent it. And once you're past that, it's sort of, again, like hiking to the top of a plateau, which in terms of microdosing, if it's a day-to-day thing, it's a little bit exhausting. So that's why I myself, I can never microdose for more than a few weeks at a time. I need to take, a break after a while, but it's definitely something everybody experiences. And I think it's interesting that, so many people have spoken on that specific side effect.
And another thing, you can always explore, this is a great opportunity for you to explore ways of reducing that anxiety. So maybe, moving helps, or grounding, or walking in nature. So you can use that time, those 45 minutes, to actually do an activity that could lower your anxiety.
And I would say from the reviews that I've received in the people that I've talked to, they're both right on. I would say it's probably a little bit too much of a dose. I've heard that quite a bit, that people either feel lethargic or get some of that come up kind of anxiety. Another thing I would recommend would be trying LSD. At least for me, I know that I find I have that a lot less with an LSD microdose. That being said, if you were to take too much of an LSD microdose, you still might run into that. But that would be my recommendation, would be to also experiment with other substances.
I think it has a lot. Well, it all depends on the person. I think well, I know that anxiety has a lot to do with the potential that someone has. So, if you're experiencing anxiety, that could be related to potential. So I would suggest trying to write, trying to create, trying to get into self-expression. But there's so many different factors when it comes to microdosing. It's the state of your psyche or your gut health. It's what other kind of stimulants or substances are you using, caffeine, sugar. I think all of these things really play a huge role on how the psychedelics affect you. So yeah.
Yeah, I hope we answered your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Another thing to add is psychedelics are not a numbing technique. They will not take the edge off. So any unprocessed feelings that lurk under in your subconscious will definitely come up. So maybe you've never known that you are you have a lot of energy that needs to be expressed, and it shows up as anxiety. It's something to explore.
Yeah, it feels more like having drunk 10 espressos in a row and you're just too jacked.
Okay, if that's the case, then you actually might not like LSD too much, because it does give you a little bit of, at least for me, physical energy as well.
Yeah, you might just want to lower your dose for now and see how that goes.
Okay, great. I'm going to try that.
Thank you, Adrian. We have Andre. Do you mind unmuting yourself?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So just before, I'm on Salt Spring Island right now with very spotty connection. So if I cut off, please raise your hand so I can stop and maybe start over. So my question is, I had a recent experience with psilocybin recently, and one of the realizations or visions that I had is that bringing magic mushrooms to the masses and making it widely available, and being able to have this large-scale consciousness brought upon humanity is maybe one solution to our world problems and our decimation of the planet and hurting each other and all those things. And so the vision was kind of like a Jenga game, where the world right now is kind of a Jenga that's been started, and it's kind of wobbly, and it could collapse at any moment. And how do you bring in the mushroom to as many people as you can before the whole thing collapses? And the question more precisely is, how do we avoid what happened in the 70s? Because that to me seems like the biggest threat to that, consciousness on a massive scale being able to happen is a ban like in the 70s. And then I realized I don't even know what happened in the 70s. I'm quite young. I'm new to the whole psychedelic scene. So I was really excited to come here and ask this question. Like, if anyone knows and has more insight on what happened then, and how can we avoid this now? Like, what are the things that also on an individual level, I could maybe help that would kind of prevent that from happening? I guess that's my biggest fear.
I would say, and this is just my opinion, the kind of thing that went wrong, maybe, or not quite wrong, but what caused psychedelics to become illegal in the late 1960s, early 1970s, was that it was a very recreational focus. And I think that our best kind of course of action to prevent that happening again would be education on the kind of other side of psychedelics, right? And that side would be the integrated psychotherapy. Clinton might be able to speak to this very well because he said that he had done some research into shamanism, and indigenous peoples have used these substances safely and very effectively for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. So I think maybe kind of learning from the more shamanistic way of experiencing psychedelics, and paying more attention to the psychotherapy and the integration rather than just treating it as recreational.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
When you say it was because of a recreational use, what specifically, what outcomes would happen that led the authorities to ban it? Was it just people behaving, without concern for the others, or was it just mass,
Yeah, well, sorry.
hysteria, or yeah?
Yeah, I was actually reading something last night about LSD in the 60s, and the authorities were concerned that it was being used as a party drug, and also there's something to be said for the fact that the authorities at the time, the government of Richard Nixon, was worried that people would take psychedelics and not want to support the war in Vietnam.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because taking so many psychedelics, they actually saw through the system and they didn't want to comply as much, and so that was a threat to U.S. government's
Hegemony.
That makes a lot of sense, but that's worrisome then, because it's kind of a catch-22. The same thing can happen now. It's just that instead of war in Vietnam, something else. You cannot sort of, as much education and barriers you put around this to make it as safe as possible, the effect in the end is inevitably the same. People are going to see through the veil, and so yeah, to me it just seems inevitable that something else is going to happen where it's going to get banned or it's going to get restricted in some way. So yeah, I'm really kind of hopeless thinking about this. So please give me some hope here.
I would say the biggest key difference between the late 60s and early 70s and now is the internet, and just the fact that information can proliferate all over the world in a matter of seconds. I would say that that's a huge asset on the side of psychedelic liberation.
I think that, what happened in the 60s and 70s was people started using psychedelics and they started freeing their minds. They started saying things that were not common, like almost as if they exited the system. And I think that the authorities and the people in power were terrified of that. There's nothing that controlling people and tyrants fear more than people who are independent and in control of their own minds. So I think when they seen these people who were starting to speak about things and starting to kind of go against the system and point out the flaws and the fact that it's a system of control, I think that really terrified the US government in particular, which is why I think they did a smear campaign against psychedelics in order to produce fear around them, so people wouldn't go and use them and figure out that they are, or remember that they are free and sovereign individuals. That I think it was a fear from the establishment why that happened. And we seem to be having another psychedelic renaissance, if you want to call it that. And I don't think they're going to stop this one. They are scared. I mean, a lot of people probably go out there and look at all the tyranny going on in the world, and they watch it like fear porn. But I imagine that these tyrants probably go out there and watch people speaking the truth and speaking out against them as fear porn for them. So we have to realize that the people who are controlling and manipulating everything are completely ruled by fear. You know, they're terrified. I mean, if you look at a lot of these politicians today, they're involved in corruption. They're tyrants, and they're having a hard time hiding it. And you know, just look at their body language, their eyes. You could see the fear. You could see the guilt. You could see, you know, they're cowards. They're liars. They're pathetic. And you know, you could say I'm being harsh, but it's just that I know who these people are. I know what they're about. And you know, I mean, if you look at Justin Trudeau, he had to shut down his event because, you know, people are getting hostile. So you know, I think the push to suppress psychedelics is really a push to suppress the expansion of human consciousness. And I think that you know, having individuals with free, you know, free sovereign individuals who are in control of their mind is one of the most powerful ways that we're going to get out of this mess. And I do think we are going to get out of this mess. We are going to come out on top, and we are going to establish a free society for future generations. And you know, it all starts in your mind. You know, freeing your own mind is definitely the way. Once you have control and freedom of your own mind, you're able to create and to you know, share your knowledge and experience and help others to free their mind. So you know, like, one of the things I'm doing right now is working on, I guess you can call it activism, but I'm trying to get Indigenous people to, you know, rise up and reestablish the sovereignty that we once had, you know, before colonization. You know, when I say things like we need to start a new government, you know, what's the first thought? You know, you're crazy, or it's impossible, or it's not going to happen. You know, so that's the system talking in people's minds. It keeps bounds and limits on them, and these boundaries and limits are, you know, exactly like the Matrix says, a prison for your mind. Keeps you limited to a lower state of consciousness, a lower way of thinking. And you know, when you look at it, I mean, all of these a lot of this education is actually indoctrination. You know, you could have 30 years of intense specialized education on a certain subject, and you could still be completely disconnected from reality. So you know, education is you know, I'm not bashing education completely, but I'm saying that it's not really meant to produce intelligence. It's meant to well, it is in a way, but I think it's more aimed towards indoctrination. I think we could see that clearly with the way many doctors and scientists are behaving in the world today. You know, with they seem to be in a state of denial, and you know, it's really getting to a point of a mass psychosis. So
Thank you, Clinton.
We have another hand raised. Marsha, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to come on. I've through, unfortunately, through cancer, I've come through psychedelics and microdosing and macro dosing. And I've found for education for myself, I'm speaking to Adrian here, checking out anything from Johns Hopkins or Imperial College of London. Robin Carhart Harris has got some amazing articles. Roland Griffin's. Yeah, there's definitely numerous clinical trials that are happening right now. MAPS, Rick Doblin. I mean, that's a great resource to be able to educate yourself on. And so I don't think it's going to go the way of it was in the 70s. I think there's so many clinical trials now that they actually have the scientific data to back up what was started in the 60s and 70s. And now, like, there's more. I think it's helping, all the clinical trials is helping to legitimize everything that's been reaching to this point. It's definitely having a renaissance in the last little while. And for me, I've been able to have an opportunity to have a legal exemption with psychedelics, and I've been able to actually have a conversation with my oncologist about it. So I think definitely things are becoming more open and more acceptable than they have in the past.
For sure. And a lot of these studies are showing, pretty insane effectiveness rates for a broad range of conditions. Like, I don't want to say, I know Anna mentioned before, it's not a magic pill, but it is significantly more effective than current treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Yeah. There are studies showing that ketamine has done wonders for depression, for example, MDMA for PTSD, as you mentioned, Marsha. Yeah.
I just wanted to offer that just because in the last 7 months, I've managed to educate myself quite, and it's like, there's a lot of literature out there if you just want to do the reading, and it's some great information. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you, Marsha.
Thank you so much. All right. Anyone else would like to ask a question or share their experience? We are, let me see here, 5 minutes away from the end of this event. Oh, we have Michael here. Michael, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hello, I'd like to share my experience on LSD that I had August 19th. The reason I did it was psychotherapeutic. I was sexually abused as a child, and it affected me a lot. Like, I haven't been in a relationship, and I keep having these like anxiety problems throughout my life in school, etc. And I'd been doing a lot of research about psychedelics for like 6 months to like make sure the setting was all right and to like maximize harm reduction. And I took a macro dose, and yeah, it really was like everything that I wanted it to be and like more. In my childhood, in my childhood, I used to go to church a lot, and I used to live in Ghana, and they were like very Protestant, and I would always see these people like falling to the ground because allegedly like the Holy Ghost would like come over them, and like I just couldn't understand it, and I almost had this envy as a child that I couldn't have any like connection with spirit, and I still had that like envy or like want to have a connection to spirit when I was an adult. And what I felt in that moment was like so profound, and ever since then I was able to come forward about my abuse to friends and other people. And lately I haven't been anxious at all. I've been doing good at work, and yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Dude, thank you so much for sharing that. That's that's incredibly brave for one, and I'm so happy for you that that you have found what you're looking for. You found the connection that you're looking for.
Thank you for sharing that. That's I have my mother right now is going through some pretty bad depression. She tried to commit suicide not too long ago, back in May, and we're all sort of trying to decide whether or not, a macro dose at this point would help. It's such a subjective thing, but I find what really helps situations like this is when people can come together and share such experiences. It's very powerful. So it's, I wish you the best, and thank you so much for sharing that. That's tremendous.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to share something profound my teacher told me, is that a lot of people today who are healers are often like very wounded themselves, and I want to use this experience to become a healer myself, to help people who have been through this that can't come out, and to let them know that there's people who understand the feeling of not being able to talk about it for years, and to help them overcome their trauma.
Andre, sorry, Michael, if you're interested, I was looking at Andre's screen there. Michael, if you want to send me an email to jeffreylebowski@gmail.com, I'll put that in the chats. I could put you in contact with some people that run training courses.
I would suggest, trying to get into Indigenous culture as well. Indigenous culture is really centered around healing. They have sharing circles, they have sweat lodges, and it's really focused on spiritual healing. So I'd also suggest the Golden Teacher strain in macrodoses. For myself, I mean, my childhood was filled with tragedy and trauma as well. So I noticed that the Golden Teacher strain has a very powerful effect for trauma. And, I used to take about 3 or 4 grams, and it really helped me work through a lot of trauma as well. So, Golden Teacher is definitely an excellent strain, specifically for trauma.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well,
MexiCube would be another one that, or like a Mazatepic, MexiCube, kind of anything in that with a name similar to that. I have read reports that quite often that is also a more introspective and therapeutic experience.
and Huautla as well.
Yeah.
It's again Mexican strain. Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing that. That's very brave, and everyone else who, came here and shared their rawness and being vulnerable and shares themselves with us. It was very, very beautiful. I hope everyone took something for themselves, and this really, benefited you. I think we are at the end of the event. So if there is anything else you want to add, if not, we will conclude this session, and I hope, we'll see you next time. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add?
I think we should do this more often.
Yeah, more than once a month, right?
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah, I
coordinate.
think it's. I think it's. I mean, it could grow in size. I think it's important to find a way to promote psychedelic use, especially in people who are have no idea about it. And like I do find when I try to promote it, it has a 50-50 effect. Sometimes people are extremely interested, and sometimes they check out and they're like, as soon as you mention magic mushrooms, they're like, okay, yeah, this guy is, it's almost taboo for them. So, I think we do need to try and promote it more to especially the general population.
I agree, and I think the other function of these sharing circles is, hearing other people's stories and recognizing yourself into that, and also when you speak and talk about your own experience, it's almost you integrate some of the insights you had, and you heal a bit more, and it's validating for others to listen to you. So next time I'll invite everyone to share a bit of their story, because it's so powerful. It's such a powerful activity to just talk a bit about that. So yes, we'll have this event again in I don't know, I'll coordinate with Jeff. We'll see exactly when we both find time, and I hope I'll see you soon.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak for Anna, but I'm a pretty busy person myself, but I will definitely try to make some time to do 2 events in September. Maybe we should do one on 9/20.
9/20? Yes.
Mushroom holiday.
Yes. That works actually. I'm quarantining myself after coming back from US, so I'll have lots of time.
Perfect. You know what's funny?
What?
Is 9/20 is my birthday.
No
So
way.
I was born to grow mushrooms and spread the benefits of psychedelic mushrooms.
Wow. It was written in stars.
Synchronicity.
For sure.
Definitely. And it's also the election on
Yeah,
the
oh,
20th.
yeah.
Everything converges. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Clinton, Michael, Jeff, and everyone else who shared their story. It was fantastic. It was the best way to, spend my Saturday afternoon. So
Yeah, thank you for everyone for tuning in, and just stay tuned to either the Spores Lab or Blue Goba or Microdosing Guru or Borealism contact lists or subscriber newsletters. We will be sending the next event information to all those lists.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having me.
Bye, everyone.